Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Rutland series. Rutland is the smallest county in the East Midlands and has some 57 parishes to its name. Without further ado, let's get walking around one of them. Welcome back to Rutland, everybody. It's nice when you come to a village with a name that you can explain. Here, I can take you to the very thing that gives this one its particular moniker. It's a well, and that's why this place is called Ashwell. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to Ashwell, perhaps one of the easiest villages to walk around in Rutland, but a really hard one to try and explain fully. Put simply, Ashwell has been in the hands of many people, a lot of whom we've met before. During my research, the names Dawnay and Palmes cropped up over and over again. They are families we've seen before close to York. The Dawnays, or Viscounts Downe as we know them already, were the family who once lived at Beningbrough Hall, whilst the Palmes of course resided at Naburn Hall. Isn't it amazing how far and wide the landed gentry got? A third name that came up was William Butterfield, and he had a massive hand in shaping the village as we know it today. There are several buildings around the place which were built by him or were influenced by him, some of them for the Dawnays. The village was well known for the Cottesmore Hunt kennels, which have now been converted to housing, and for Ashwell Prison, which actually isn't in the parish. We'll see that in the parish of Burley. The prison was around 2 miles south of the village and was previously the site of a World War II US Army base. Ashwell's most famous daughter was by far the aviator Beryl Markham, and today's special section will focus on her. The village also has one of the oldest buildings in Rutland, a former Midland Railway signal box, and 6, count 'em, ancient wells. Lots to talk about, so let's get going. Our start point is Langham Road, a long curved street to the west of the main village cluster. It runs over a level crossing, which will be our last port of call on this route. If you follow Langham Road to its junction with Oakham Road, look to your left and you'll see a small clearing in the trees. Sited in that clearing is an ancient well. This is one of 6 wells around the village, and according to the locals, the water from this one can cure eye disorders. Whether or not that's true is debatable, but I like a bit of folklore, so I'd like to believe it. This well goes by a few names, including the Holy Well or the Wishing Well. The inscription above it reads, "All ye who hither come to drink, rest not your thoughts below. Look at that sacred sign and think, whence living waters flow." Nobody knows for certain if it's this well, but one of the 6 around the village is responsible for the name Ashwell. You see, Ashwell literally means the well amongst the ash trees. Okay, so now we've established where the village's name comes from, let's have a look and see what it's got, shall we? We're now outside Ashwell Village Hall, the first of a few landmarks in this place. Our last one will be the church. There's plenty to see in between these 2 buildings, so let's get cracking. This is the village hall. It was originally built in the 1920s as a theatre for the local drama society. It underwent a major restoration between 2020 and 2021. Describing itself as a picture box setting, the newly refurbished hall is perfect for meetings, parties, wedding receptions, or presentations. Class building. Time to wander down Oakham Road now. Here we have Ashwell Motors, which has been a village staple for over 60 years. Opposite this, there's a bus stop. Ashwell is served by the numbers 29A, 184 and the R2 Rutland Flyer. In terms of amenities, Ashwell does pretty well for itself. See what I did there? I'm here all week. Water Lane now, a street with an obvious name given it runs parallel with a stream. This doesn't have a name though as far as I'm aware, but its source is just to the south of the village. As the road bends, a big house appears on the corner. That's Home Farm, one of the oldest buildings in Rutland, dating back to the late 16th century. So what we've done there is we've completed a little V-shaped point to the very southern tip of Ashwell village. Originally when I planned this route I was going to walk straight down Brookdean, but I think I made the right choice because there was more to see out there. Now we're going to turn left and back onto Water Lane and head up towards the main road through the village. As we come to the end of Water Lane, another big house appears on the left, this time with an abundance of chimneys. The stream we've been following disappears under the road, and we're turning left. I made a mistake here because I was meant to turn right briefly to catch a former primitive Methodist chapel, but clearly I couldn't read my own route properly. No matter, I can still tell you about it. It was built in 1915, sold in 1996, and in 2014 it was converted into a 2-bedroom house. Next is a thatched property known as Middle Farm or Allen's Farm. This early house, which has a largely untouched interior, is thought to date back to at least 1700. Then we hit the former village shop and post office. That's the white building in your shot now. This overlooks a small elongated triangle of grass which is the village green, complete with its phone box. In 1935, 2 trees were planted here to commemorate the Silver Jubilee of George V, but they've since died. Only one replacement now remains. Okay, so we've reached the church, and as you can see, we've got the lit gate behind me. That is probably one of the tallest lit gates I've ever seen. Look at the size of it. It must be at least, what, 20 foot high? Blimey. It's a big one. Let's go and explore the church. Outside the church is the War Memorial. This was the subject of some controversy when it was being planned because some villagers felt the names on it should be in alphabetical order rather than by rank. However, they were overruled. Now we're in the churchyard after passing through the lit gate, which was designed by William Butterfield. St Mary's Church is mainly of 14th century origin but was restored by Butterfield in 1851 in memory of Thomas Dawnay, who was once the rector of Ashwell. He died in 1850. Butterfield was also responsible for all the modern interior fittings, including the stone font, which has an ingenious counterweighted lid which rises at the touch of a hand. Also down to him was the carved oak pulpit, the chancel screen, the lectern, the pews, and the tiled floor, many of which bear the Viscounts Downe shield. Let's go inside and see some of that lot, but before we do, here's a second entrance to the churchyard. Made of stone, this is a Grade 2 listed Gothic arch. Okay, so the church is open according to one local resident, so guess what? We are heading inside. I've taken my hat and my glasses off, got to be respectful, although it's a bit difficult to manage them in my hand with the camera, so hopefully there's somewhere to put them down in here. Oh, okay, right, I think the first job is to find a light switch. It's a bit dark in here. Let's see. I see no light switch. That's a little bit disconcerting. We'll find it as we walk around, so I'll just put my hat on here for a second. So, let's head into the chancel first. That's what we always do when we come into churches. We always walk down the aisle into the chancel. Let's see what it has got. Massive stained glass window is one thing it definitely has. Check that out. That's quite amazing, isn't it? Lots of light coming in through that. There's the altar. Let's turn around. So we've got an aisle to the left, an aisle to the right, a north and south aisle that'll be. Lovely red carpet, choir stalls. Big font here with a big font cover. Look at this. This is impressive. It's like a spire, isn't it? Like a spire on top of the font. Now I noticed just as I walked in this corner, it seems to be something war related, because there's a horseshoe here, symbol of the county of Rutland, of course. 1918 to 2018. So I imagine this flag was flown over the church during the Great War, 1914 to 1918. So it's on top of a flag. I imagine that is to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, one would assume. This is interesting. Look, we've got a little folder here that says Ashwell's Past. So I would imagine this tells you in great detail, I would have thought, some of the history of the village. Probably much more than I can squeeze into one video. So if you want to know a bit more about Ashwell, this is the place to come, apparently. Go and have a read of this. There's another one here. Winifred Aylan's Memories of Ashwell, and Ashwell World War I, compiled by Sally Harnett. Let's look above what we got here. So this is actually a war memorial. It's a bit difficult to read with no lights. There we go. There's all the people that died in the two world wars. First World War there, Second World War at the bottom. And then we've got a little book exchange / library there too. And I think that's about it. There's a couple of tablets on the wall. There's a nice fish banner there. I wonder what that's all about. What's this? This is interesting. Not seen anything like this before. Let's have a read. Former tower clock movement. It's believed that the displayed former tower or turret clock has stood unattended on the clock floor of the tower since 1890, approximately 120 years. Messrs. English clockmakers of Ashbourne, Derbyshire, lowered the clock to ground level and undertook restoration in October 2009. And there's a few things of what they reported. So I imagine this was the original clock mechanism then, I would have thought. That's pretty cool. It's nice that that's been preserved. Brilliant. Lovely little church, this. Sorry I couldn't find the lights, guys, but hopefully you've got the gist of it here in Ashwell. Going to leave a card on the table and then we'll head out back onto the road again and see what else we can find here before we wrap this one up. Next, we need to talk about 3 historic buildings. The filming here concentrates only on Ashwell House, which is in your shot now. Standing next to the church, this was originally the rectory. Behind us is Ashwell Old Hall. I couldn't see enough of it to film anything, but it's important as it has the site of a former medieval settlement and fish ponds in its grounds. It's called the Old Hall because there's a newer Ashwell Hall half a mile to the south of the village, built in 1879 in the Tudor style. Both halls are very private and impossible to show. There's not much left now. Here's a crossroads which we'll become very familiar with in a few moments. You're now looking at a field behind the well where we began. It was originally the village cricket field and once had a pavilion. In its day it was a real centre of village life, especially in the summer months. Now you might have been able to hear a train in the background just there. That's because Ashwell is flanked by a railway line. So let's talk trains. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to talk about before we leave Ashwell behind, and that is the railway line. You can see here there's a level crossing with some very old-fashioned style gates. They are electric barriers, they're not the kind that have to be moved by hand. We've seen those before. There are 2 level crossings in Ashwell. This is one of them, and the other one is along the road towards the next one. So we're going to hop in the car and drive over that one and talk a bit about it. The railway line to the west of the village is the main route between Oakham and Melton Mowbray, which in turn forms part of the longer Birmingham to Peterborough line. As such, it passes through Oakham Station, the closest one to Ashwell. However, once upon a time, Ashwell had a station of its own, and it was right next to this level crossing on Whissendine Road. The station is now closed, but its signal box still stands, and it's still in use as well. It was built in 1912 and is of the type typical of the Midland Railway. Ashwell Station, which opened in 1848, was operated by the Midland Railway. The line, though, has been here a bit longer. It was constructed in 1845 as part of the Syston and Peterborough Railway. Just to the north of this area, there was once a junction where a branch line ran towards Cottesmore's ironstone mines. In 1966, the station closed, and its former site now houses some industrial units called Station Court. These are they. Lastly, let's talk about Beryl Markham, a famous aviator who was born in Ashwell as Beryl Clutterbuck in 1902. Markham was the first person ever to fly solo, non-stop, across the Atlantic Ocean to North America. That feat was achieved on the 4th of September 1936. The flight, which took off from Abingdon near Oxford, lasted for 20 hours. Her aircraft was a Vega Gull, a 1930s four-seater plane that was built by Percival Aircraft Limited, and it was named the Messenger. Over eastern Canada, it suffered fuel starvation due to icing of the fuel tank vents, and Markham was forced to crash land at Baleine Cove on Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. Even though it wasn't a successful landing, the flight still earned her the prestigious honour. Markham chronicled many of her adventures in her memoir, West with the Night, which was published in 1942. And how about this? Due to her fame, Markham has an impact crater named after her on the planet Venus. Crazy. And that will do us, folks. That's Ashwell in the books. Now next week we'll be taking on the village's northerly neighbour. It's a place that has links to a famous Scottish poet, and after World War I it was one of the lucky few villages which suffered no military loss. There's a couple of teasers for you there. There's some more coming on it next week. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.